Hi, I'm attorney Gregory Dell here with attorney Jessup, and we're going to talk about applying for long-term disability benefits with Principal. And Stephen, you've handled a lot of claims with Principal at all levels, from the application through appeals through litigation. But in this video, I want to give some tips to people as to what they should expect when applying for long-term disability benefits with Principal, and the benefits of some different things that we've seen as we go through this video about during the application process, which can help people to get approved with their benefits. So what's the most important thing that comes to your mind when someone calls you and says, look, I want to apply for benefits with Principal?
I mean, the first thing that's going to pop in my mind is Principal is one of the few insurance companies that offer individual disability products you get through an agent, and also group disability. So knowing what the policy is, it will give you kind of a context of more of what to expect in the way they may handle, an application, and more specifically the information they're going to want. So first and foremost, knowing how did you get the policy, where's the policy from, and then kind of working, knowing from that, because like I said, each policy in that situation is going to be a little different, but generally speaking, it's this idea of, well, they're going to be very thorough. More so than some of the other larger insurance companies like your Cigna's, Prudential's, and MetLife's. They're going to want a lot more information out of the insured. So just kind of an understanding that you're going to have to be real proactive on the front end in gathering more information than typical than just your normal claim forms in order to get your claim kind of rocking and rolling.
Right, and since you did mention they have group and individual, it is unique in the fact that they have group and they also offer their own short-term disability, which opens up a little bit different dynamic, because usually we're looking at a 90 or 180-day elimination period, and when you have a short-term, it can be 7 days or 30 days, and so you're into the disability carrier that much earlier, because I know when I have my long-term disability claims, I'm not reaching out to the disability carriers until close to the elimination period is ending, as opposed to just calling them right away, because you don't know if you're going to be out for 90 days or 180
Correct.
days. So why would you call the disability company, 1 week out or 30 days out when you still don't know if you're even going to be eligible for benefits? So what about what should a claimant expect they're going to need from a medical perspective in order to prove their eligibility for benefits with Principal?
One of the big things is it's also going to be dependent on what the condition you're applying for. From a medical standpoint, actual medical treatment, I mean, you've seen it a lot, I've seen it a lot in applications where people have a problem. Maybe they should be getting to a specialist to see it. They haven't done that, or they haven't gotten a referral. They may not actually be going to their doctor too much about it. And sometimes we're contacted and people already have given notice to Principal that they want to file a claim. So first and foremost, that if you're even considering filing, that you are getting treatment, you are consulting with doctors. If you need a specialist, you're getting into that specialist. So you want to make sure that from the moment you contact them, there is already going to be a nice paper trail of information that's documenting what your condition is and how it's impacting your ability to work, and other potential activities of daily living.
And when you're working with a claimant to help them apply, how do you coordinate with them and their doctor in order to help prove their claim?
Well, it's one of those things. We got to know what the medical condition is, what the job is, and how that condition is impacting the ability to do the job. So it's really having to tailor it down. There's general ideas and concepts of it, but every person's claim is going to be different. So it's a matter of making sure things are showing up in the documentation, in the medical records sufficiently, explaining where restrictions and limitations are, because a lot of people who file for disability, it's a chronic medical condition that they've been able to work with. They've been able to work through it, and then it gets to a point where it's just too much for them. And Principal is always going to look at it and say, well, hey, you've been working with these problems, so what's changed? What's different now? Making sure that stuff is in there, or in the situations that can be very complex, if this is an employer-provided policy where a person has been able to work, they're not having issues at work, meaning they're not getting reprimanded, they're not struggling at work, they're not on any type of, modification program at work, if you will. They're just working extra hours to get the work done, what we call working for the insurance company. So principal may look at it and say, well, you've had no issues doing your job. We understand you have this medical condition, but there aren't any issues in your work performance. So does it actually qualify as a disability, legally speaking, under the policy? So it's making sure that these records are going to document and lay the foundation for the rest of your claim. Like you said, you may not be out for an indefinite period of time, but there always is that possibility. So it's that front end work in the medical, working with the doctors, letting the doctors also know that your medical complaints, we're not talking disability in the sense of, not being able to do activities of daily living, not being able to get out of bed, whatever the case may be. It's going to be geared towards, those occupational specific demands. So doctors understand the context of the complaints of the patient. So it's really building this foundation for years of potential benefits to come.
So what it sounds like through those examples is that you're guiding the claimant as to how to communicate with the doctors, how things should be documented in the medical records, because as you and I know, doctors aren't documenting for insurance companies.
Yeah.
They're documenting to basically keep a history and remind themselves of what's going on with their patient so that the next time they see the patient, they know what are your complaints, what have been your progressions, your regressions, your status, and then looking back at those records. But it's not meant to identify every single thing that you and I know the insurance company wants. So through the education process of working with our clients, you can tell the doctor the things that we know have to be in those medical records. Because Steve, if it's not in there, the disability company, what they do is they talk about what's not in there, not
Correct.
What's in there, what's not in there. And it's easy cherry picking for them. But on the flip side, it's easy to get the right information in there if you know what to tell your doctor and you can get your doctor to cooperate with putting that proper information in there. And then the next step is the attending physician form that the that principal is going to require, and making sure that that's completed appropriately and not completed by a nurse, who may get a form from them. And that's a whole process that we work through with the claimant as well. And that's not just the initial application. That's going to continue either every 2 months, 3 months, semi-annually, annually. It depends on the type of medical condition that the claimant has as well. And then the other thing with the medicals, we always tell our clients that you should be prepared that someone from principal is likely going to call your doctor or doctors and have some kind of conversation, and that your doctor needs to be aware of what your occupation is, that it's not about your activities of daily living, it's about your inability to do your job. And the doctor really needs to know that, because most doctors think, no, I didn't tell, my patient that they couldn't go out to eat, or they couldn't walk the dog, or, that they had to be limited in how long they were sitting. But the principal's not going to say, well, did you know that, this person is a computer software engineer and that they have to do X, Y, and Z? They don't get into that. Because
I think a lot of times doctors think, when they think disability, they think of this idea of Social Security disability, not being able to work at all. And that's not going to be the case with the principal policy.
Right. So you really got to be prepared and work, in tandem with your doctors and get everyone on board. Because Steve, how often do we see that one doctor kind of steps out of line, and if they get one person to give an inconsistent statement, they're going to deny the claim.
Yeah.
So what else in terms of applying for the occupational duties? How important is it for a claimant with principal to sufficiently present what they were doing, and how do they do that?
Yeah, one of the big things I've found, and people have found too, clients of mine, people who've called in, is, they've been with a company for so long, their employer so long, that I've seen it, I'm sure you've seen it, where they actually have old job descriptions on file. Person is doing some other type of work now, they're in a different capacity. So I think one of the biggest things is making sure that, even in your own work file, that they do have, your formal job title and that job description correct. If you can get a copy of your job description, that's also very important. Now, generally speaking, principal is going to take a look at how your occupation is performed in the national economy, which basically means they're not going to look at how you do it for your employer or even at the location, but how it's generally performed. So they strip it down to real generic job definitions and descriptions that the Department of Labor uses. And that's how they're going to take a look at it. So in certain occupations, this can have really, really severe effects for someone's ability to actually get the claim approved, because if principal isn't working in the right context of what your job is, even in this national economy standard, it is going to result in a greater chance of being denied. So I think it's also important to make sure that your employer does have your job category correct. Because principal is not necessarily going to be in the wrong if they're relying on your employer for occupational information and your employer sends the wrong information. Also, another thing to be concerned about is those initial claim forms, that claim packet. A lot of times that's going to be an employer statement that's going to need to be filled out by the employer. So making sure HR is doing that correct as well. So those are the things you have to kind of look at, because principal will always, if they can find a way to insulate themselves for looking like they weren't incorrect, there wasn't wrongdoing on their part, and it was, say, the employer providing incorrect information, they'll take that and run with that as a basis of denial, and then you got to fight them to try to get that corrected.
And Steve, you know that on almost all your principal claims, that when a claim's initially filed, or even if a claimant calls principal to say, hey, I want to report a claim, I think I'm going to need the file, they're going to want to do an initial interview with an assigned claim rep. How important is it to be prepared for that statement and the significance of what you tell principal during that phone call?
It's very important. I mean, it's so important if they have that initial call prior to claim forms being submitted. So a lot of times too, you may get claim forms, you submit them, then they want to have a follow-up call, and they're going to be looking for consistency between the claim form and that conversation. But in the situation where they want to speak to you prior to forms, and they say, oh, we just want to get some general information, they'll ask you what's your date of disability, the medical conditions, things like this. And it seems pretty benign what they're asking for, but it can really pigeonhole your claim to just a certain thing going forward, especially medical conditions. You may not know necessarily if your policy has restrictions and limitations related to certain medical conditions, or what even actually your date of disability is. Sometimes it takes a little bit of work to determine what that is. But that initial call is going to set the basis of how principal is going to do their review. That is always going to be what they look at, everything that's going to come in the future in the context of that initial phone call. So you want to make sure you're going to know essentially what's going to be asked of you that day and what your responses are. With our clients, and I think most lawyers will always say it, answer a question. Don't add too much extra information. Answer the question that's being asked, because if they're recording it and you start to get beyond the actual topic and the question they're asking, you're giving them additional information. And what an insurance company will always do is look for inconsistencies. And if they find inconsistency, they have a reason not to trust you. And if they don't trust you on something small, they will extrapolate that over to the rest of the claim and try to say, well, if you weren't truthful here, why should we believe you when you tell us how your condition is impacting your ability to work?
So I think overall, we talked about the medical, you have to have super prepared medical, you got to be aware of your occupational, and you have to dictate the path of which this claim is going to go. You can't rely on the limited claim forms that principal is going to send you for your doctors, for your claimant statement, for your employer form. You have to go above and beyond and put forward more information than they're asking for, because it's minimal and it's designed minimally so that they can maybe have a leg to stand on to say there's just not enough information here to support it. But I know when we're representing a claimant, we're already anticipating that because we've seen it 100 times in presenting the claim in a very thorough and detailed manner, so that when they get the full complete package, we know there's nothing else they're going to ask for short of saying, okay, we either want to speak to your client or we're going to do an exam of your client. Those are the only two things remaining, because we basically have contemplated every single scenario of what they could need. And time is of the essence when we're representing a claimant who's submitting a claim to principal, because they've likely already gone 90 days or 6 months without income, and they're really counting on their income to be replaced because they can't work. So one of the things we highly encourage is to go ahead, and we have a lot of information on Principal and also about your occupation or your medical condition and how it relates to a disability claim, because a lot of the carriers behave in the same manner, so you can start to get a flavor for how Principal is going to look at your disability claim. So we encourage you to watch some of our other videos and read some of the cases and lawsuit summaries that we've provided on our website. Most importantly, if you have a copy of your policy, feel free to reach out to Stephen or myself. We'll ask you to email us or fax us a copy of your disability policy. We'll immediately set a free phone consultation with you where we'll review your policy and we'll let you know what we think your chances are of getting approved, and we'll immediately let you know how we can help you to put you in the best position to get your benefits approved. So thank you for considering our firm, and we look forward to the opportunity to speak with you in the future.